Hello and welcome to the Hardcore Soft Skills Podcast. This is Yadi Caro. In each episode, we delve into a different skill with the help of an expert. After each episode, you can start applying what you have learned to advance in your career. Today, we talk about a very necessary skill, conflict resolution. Conflict is unavoidable at work, no matter if you work in an office or remotely. So I'm sure you have thought, if only I had a step-by-step guide to help me deal with it. Dr. Paul Marciano just wrote it. Dr. Paul, also known as the Respect Doctor, just launched his book, Let's Talk About It, Turning Confrontation into Collaboration at Work. I love this book because it gave concrete steps on dealing with conflict resolution based on situations, personality, and even how to deal with it remotely. Dr. Paul earned his PhD in clinical psychology from Yale University and is also the author of the book Carrots and Sticks Don't Work. In this episode, he shares some of the advice from his book and specific things we can do now to deal with conflict successfully. Let's listen. Well, thank you, Dr. Paul, for being with me here on the show. How are you doing?
Well, thank you, Yadi, for having me.
And I must ask you first, before we start talking about your book, I wanted to know about your background in terms of why did you decided to choose the field of psychology?
Oh, well, the same reason everybody does, because we have messed up childhoods. That's just how that works. I took a class in psychology when I was in high school, actually, and just found it fascinating. And then when I got to college, I took the kind of introduction class, and I just got so interested. And I got interested in both the field of clinical psychology, but then also industrial organizational. And one of the things I liked about both was they were very applied to helping individuals or helping, obviously, teams and organizations. And I was given wonderful opportunities, even while I was in college, to engage with and work with people. And so when I had the opportunity, getting into a clinical PhD program is much more stringent, difficult than an IO program, a doctorate program. And I realized that if I could get into clinical, I could always do the IO, but not the other way around.
Yeah.
So that's why I was blessed to obviously get into Yale and did my PhD. And then I left. And after that, when I was a professor for a couple of years, I started in clinical. And then I'm like, it just wasn't for me nearly as much as I wasn't as attractive as it was working with companies. I just found, for me anyway, that was more, my calling, and doing things like survey development. And I'm a big fan of 360-degree assessments, because I think people are largely, I think most people don't have a great deal of emotional intelligence, and are pretty unaware oftentimes of their impact on other people. And providing people with that kind of assessment and, some coaching typically afterward can just have such an impact, not only on themselves, but on everybody around them.
Yeah, and even on this book, let's talk about it. And the book you had before this, the Carrots and Sticks Don't Work, you talk a lot about the concept of respect. And I want to know whether you decided to focus on kind of that particular concept overall.
Yeah. So when my dissertation was on motivation and behavior modification, and that was my focus in graduate school. And in 2000, I was asked to present at a conference around motivating employees in the 21st century. And so I put my slide deck together, and it had every motivational theory ever made. And because I'm an expert, right, in that. And I looked and I went, oh my God, I am going to put everybody to sleep, and they are not going to take anything meaningful away. And so the name of my company is actually Whiteboard, because I love whiteboards, and because you kind of like create, right? So I put the different theories up, and then I just began to draw arrows and find, delete things and combine things. And I just really wanted to find what I felt was the, kind of the driver behind people being motivated. And it was during that time, Yadi, that I also learned the distinction between motivation and engagement. Which we don't have to go into detail here, but the idea that when people feel respected by others, and they engage with those individuals. When people feel disrespected, they just disengage emotionally, psychologically, behaviorally. And so that formed really the core. That's how I kind of got to the idea of respect. And, I've been very blessed because I think that, the book has done remarkably well over the last decade. And it is a testament to the importance of respect in every culture. How it gets manifested behaviorally differs a lot, but we can't question why it's important. And I know I'm rambling, but I'll say one more thing. So it's always interesting, if respect is so important to people, why is it so important to us? Everybody would like to be liked, but if push came to shove, respect is more important for most of us. And that's because I think it's related to our survival, in the sense that in our tribes, if you're respected, it means that you're perceived as having value. And when you have value, then you're embraced and you're protected. It's when we don't have value to our tribe, we're not respected, that we are then viewed as being expendable. So I think that's what it's tied to.
In terms of the of this current book, for the, and I guess a part of respect will be conflict resolution. Why focus this particular book on conflict resolution? Which, by the way, you mentioned in the book that you started writing it as the pandemic started. Is that the case?
Yeah. Well, as most people probably start writing books, it started years ago, and I just finally got around to it. Obviously it's terrible what we're going through, and at the same time, it's how I've spent basically the last 10 months or so. So, to share a personal story, my father and his brother got into an argument when my father was in his 20s, and they never spoke again. I never met my only uncle, and I've never met my first cousins.
Oh, wow.
So I know that's really dramatic. But at the same time, it left a really big impression on me. And most families don't have that much drama, but a lot of families do have drama, right? Because great Aunt Mary was left off, a bar mitzvah invite by accident because whatever. There's lots of cases, I think, in our families and all of our relationships in which there's been some level of conflict that we've really avoided. And, the argument, the thesis I have is that much of the dysfunction in the world, professionally, personally, United States government, most of the dysfunction is because we either avoid having critical conversations, or we don't have really the skills to have them in a productive manner. And so in my 30 years in the field, as I've worked with, different individuals and organizations, I feel as though the greatest skill gap, the greatest opportunity when it comes to fostering collaborative working relationships is in this area of helping people to address conflict in a very respectful, straightforward manner that leads to greater collaboration.
Yeah, and I thought it was very interesting in the book as well that you mentioned that there's if we're in an organization that kind of tries to avoid conflict, there's an impact to that as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I just prior to this got off a call with a client, and there are two individuals who got into a very nasty argument. It has been over a year, and during the course of that year, it has had a decidedly negative impact on the entire team. People have chosen sides around it, right? There's just this very unhealthy tension. Conversations aren't taking place on a professional level that they should. And so mostly, Yadi, if you and I get into some conflict, right? If you say or do something that gets me upset, first of all, what typically happens is we don't have the conversation, or if we do, it gets worse. Mm-hmm. If we don't have it, then I'm resentful towards you, and that builds up, and then it kind of shows up in different ways behaviorally. But again, but we only think about it as between us, when in fact, it really then kind of bleeds out to the rest of our team members. And then ultimately, usually in terms of our team's ability to really function at the highest possible level.
Yeah, because I was talking actually to a coworker today. I'm mentioning about the book, and I just mentioned matter of factly, like, yeah, conflict is good to have conflict, and they were like, "What? Are you insane? Like, what do you mean?" So the concept of having good conflict, because there's always going to happen. It's just a matter of how we deal with it, of course. And I do
And
want to know. Yeah, go ahead.
no, and I would say too is, conflict, as long as we define it as differences of opinion,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
as long as, and the biggest problem is that I think there are lots of problems in this area. One is the language that we use and the mindset that we have going into these conversations, Yadi. So if I say there's a conflict and we're going to have a conflict conversation, then we go into it with a certain mindset, as opposed to you and I have very differences of opinion around a particular issue. And it's important for me to understand where you're coming from, right?
Hmm.
Because what's important to me is that we do have a mutually respectful relationship, and that we work for what's in the best interest of our team and our customers. So anyway, sorry.
Oh no, based on your experience that you have had with different organizations, what has been a common source of conflict that you've seen?
Oh, invariably that one person talked negatively about somebody behind their back.
Hmm.
Can you believe what Yadi did?
Yeah.
Right? XYZ. Like that's it. There's other things, of course, too, but instead that would be, I think, probably the biggest driver of it.
And in the book, you also mention a lot of different steps based on the situation, based on personalities, and you provide great examples. And I highly recommend the listeners to uh, buy the book and review it, because it provided a lot of great details. And one of the things that stood out to me was the aspect of self-reflection as well. So it's we could deal with different conflicts with different personalities, but you also talk about the looking at ourselves and seeing if we are the problem. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think that's so important. One of the look, we walk around the world thinking we're right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One of the things that I suggest is when you get into a situation, the difference of opinion, and is to just first of all start with the places, make the assumption that you don't have all the facts, that you don't have all the knowledge, that you're missing something. So you really want to start from that. So I would say to you, Yadi, my understanding of the situation is that this is what happened. What am I missing? What do I have wrong? So
Mm-hmm.
that the conversation can start from a place of mutual understanding and agreement around the facts to as much extent as that is possible. And then to really, and I do this especially when I am in conflict with somebody. I try to remind myself, I don't necessarily have the right answer, or what even means the right answer. Is the right answer for, and when I say the right answer, that's probably for me and what's my best interest.
Mm-hmm.
And so my what's my contribution to the conflict? It's the looking in the mirror. And I think also really importantly, the aspect of empathy. I remember once, I may have put this in the book, that I think I did, sitting in a workshop that's being run by this monk, and at the end of it, he pointed to every person and he said, "Here's what I know about everybody in this room, and that is you're getting along in the world the best way you know how."
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's fundamentally true. Like we all are. Like all of us are dealing with all kinds of stuff in our lives, right? Especially now. And so whenever I do get into a situation with somebody else, I remind myself, that's a good person. They're just trying to get along in the world the best way I can. And to look in that mirror and say, what am I bringing to this that's causing some level of, distrust, or how am I acting in a way that's some ways disrespectful? Because if you can't, if you don't stop trying to solve other people, worry about you, right? And how you can be the best partner you can during these kinds of conversations.
I want to go back to what you were describing earlier in the common aspect of somebody said something about me and I didn't like it. And what happens if let's say I have a fight, or my coworker is saying negative things about me, kind of, and I perceive that I'm on the right, so to speak. And that coworker may tend to be a little bit volatile, or is there a good way? What would be a recommended way to kind of ensure that the kind of relationship at work continues while trying to address the conflict with that particular volatile, so to speak, coworker?
Yeah. So from having read my book, I'm just somebody who tries to be really authentic and really straightforward. The first thing you do in any of these situations is breathe, take a time out, gain some perspective. You can ask friends. One of the things I'll say is, like, let me just share with you what's happened, and get your perspective on it. As a quick aside, somebody read my book, and as you know, in there, I invite people to contact me if they're dealing with something. And yesterday, 2 days ago, a woman did, and she shared me the story, and I had to reply to her, and I go, actually, I think that the other people are being quite reasonable. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to take a look at what's driving your upset around this. And in fact, after she gave it some real reflection, she said, yeah, you know what? I think I overreacted. Mm-hmm. And then we did some other things, and as part of that. But to get back on track here, so I take a time out. Now, again, you don't take a time out that lasts a month, because then it's a lot less like you're ever going to address it. But 24 hours, 36 hours, something to think it through. Again, there's questions in the book you want to ask yourself and have conversations about. And then you have to authentically come from a place of, I care about our working relationship. It's important to me, for the sake of our team, that you and I are able to collaborate with one another. It's, for the sake of our clients. And, some things come up, and I don't know if it's true or it's not true, but I just want to share it with you, because it is something that's really bothering me. And you put it out there, this is what I've heard. You can give the other person, through silence, the opportunity to apologize in some way. If they don't, that's fine. You just say, my request is that if you have any concerns about me or something I've done, is that you come to me directly going forward. Is that something you can commit to? Yeah. And that's it. And I do think, and one of, in any of these conversations, before you have them, you want to be really clear about what you want to get out of them. Because too often it's like, I just want to vent, and that's not productive. And I am a big fan of leaving these conversations with a request. So my request is, going forward, XYZ, and get that commitment.
Yeah, that's going back to the self-reflection aspect and taking the time. So yeah, certainly good advice, and something that the point of venting is something that we enjoy doing to feel better. It's not productive at all.
in vent, I like to vent to my pet. Vent to your dog. Yeah, they just look at you curiously. But yeah.
And a couple more things. So I want to know as well, when we think about trying to resolve a conflict, it's better to do it in person. You do indicate in the book that you should never ever do it via text or
right.
or in a writing format. How about for video conference? You have a chapter dedicated in the book for that. So will you share some of the pieces of advice when it comes to trying to address conflict, addressing conflict when we're not working in an office and we just have to do it via video conference?
Yeah, all of these times have been so interesting, because I think that in some ways it's made it more likely, in some ways less likely, to create conflict with individuals. Fundamentally, there's no difference in the sense that I'm going to approach it in a place coming from, I care about our relationship. That's going to stay the same. I think that the benefit of having this kind of a medium is actually, it tends to keep people's emotions suppressed. So that's actually a good thing. It also is because people are in their homes, they feel safer in general. So especially if you're in a situation you're dealing with somebody who you feel more threatened by, or like it's a bullying situation, actually, I think there's an advantage, because the physical proximity can feel intimidating. So having this level of distance can be helpful. And it's also the case that, with one click, I can end our conversation. Not saying you should do that. I wouldn't just end it automatically, but I might say, Yadi, I apologize. I really need some more time to think about this. I'll send you an email and we can find a time to talk tomorrow, and to end that. It can be threatening because people feel like really like we just have our faces here. And so that can be a little bit more intimidating. I would say to make sure to continue to express your nonverbals. The other thing, which is interesting, these are things people don't really think about. I'm Italian, so I talk with my hands. When people are upset, they tend to get up and express themselves physically, right? Thematically with their body. Again, as you're seated, it's less likely that that's going to happen. You're just going to be more calm when you're sitting down than when you're actually standing up. So I actually see there's an advantage to having some of these conversations over video. I never would have thought that was the case, but I think there are.
Is there a situation when we should definitely avoid conflict or kind of abandon any efforts for conflict resolution?
Well, and again, I say this in the book, there are some questions you need to ask yourself. You have to be pragmatic about it. If there are some instances in which it actually could cause more harm in some ways, maybe if you're dealing with somebody who's super volatile and or you really fear some form of retribution, I would have conversations with, of course, your human resources department or your manager around those. What I say is, what happens a lot of times is things happen and we get upset about them and we internalize it. And it's because of something somebody else said. Well, they're sleeping fine at night. Like, why is it that we're allowing what they've said and what they've done to have such an incredibly negative impact on us? And I see this all the time. I saw it recently with somebody who was a department manager and somebody else spoke ill of that person, and it just had her so upset. And you know what? It's about that person much more than it is about you. So I think there are times, again, I go through some of these in the book, is pragmatically, we should probably let them go or leave them in the hands of somebody else. But I think what's really important too is to let some of that negativity go. I forget who said that quote, but when we get angry at other people, it's like, we drink poison and expect the other person to die. Well, the other person's sleeping fine at night. So there's part of this, not holding on to it, right? Allowing it to go. So if you're not able to address it, confront it for some reason, then being able to let it go. And by the way, if that's the situation that you're not able to really confront it, the best strategy is probably just to avoid that person as much as possible going forward, because there's a reason why you're not able to address it. Unfortunately, sometimes it's your boss, in which case, look for another job.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this advice that you're sharing, and for the book as well, because as I mentioned, it had very specific and valuable advice that we need, because we're all stressed out as the situation at home and work. So I think it's certainly something that we all need. So thank you so much.
Well, you're very, very welcome. And as you may be able to say, a lot of the strategies in here will apply as much to one's personal life as their professional.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's the best way that people can get in touch with you?
So, just email me, paul@paulmarciano.com.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Hardcore Soft Skills Podcast. I have more resources for you from today's episode. Just go to the website hardcoresoftskillspodcast.com and subscribe to receive the weekly lessons. If you like what you've heard, give us a 5-star review via the website or via Apple Podcasts, and share with others as well. Thank you, and until the next episode.